Well, hello xenographers everywhere and welcome to another episode. This week we're going to be taking a look at 5 more lenses that I've been recently using and testing out, and they've all got unique qualities to recommend them. These lenses all have an identity and a signature to their image that I've found really pleasing. Some of them are readily available, others are less common, but they've all got a particular quality that will give your digital images a unique and signature look. So in today's lineup we've got the Industar 50mm f3.5. We've got the Olympus Zuiko 135mm f3.5. We've got the Olympus Zuiko 200mm f4. We've got the Kiron 28 to 85mm f2.8 to f3.8. And we've got the Leica Summitar 50mm f2. So quite a range of lenses today with a number of different qualities, a number of different advantages and disadvantages, a number of different factors to recommend them. So first up today we've got the Industar 50mm f3.5. This is a real ugly duckling of the lens world, and this particular version is suffering from quite heavy corrosion, as you can see. Nevertheless, appearances can be deceptive. This is one heck of a lens. This little lens, which many people wouldn't look twice at, is capable of making some of the nicest images you'll ever find. This is one of the best lenses I know for rendering colours. It gives your images lots of pop. And perhaps surprisingly for a lens that traces its roots right back to the 1930s, it's really sharp. It's actually quite something, and I was really surprised to find out how good this lens is. It came to me on an old Zorky 4 which I never quite got working, and this was one of those lenses that got stuck away at the back of a drawer, never really used very much forgotten about, and hardly used at all. When I did dig it out of the drawer and took it for a spin, I was actually quite astonished by the kind of images it can make. It's a fantastic little thing. It's made entirely of metal, and because that metal is aluminium, that means it's really light. Now this is a rigid version, but there was also a collapsible version made. As I understand it, that has similar image making abilities. It's a really good little lens in either collapsible or fixed versions. It's a rangefinder lens, so you're not going to get much closer than 3 feet or 1 meter. There was also an M42 version though for the Zenit SLR cameras, and though I've never tried one of those, I think that one might be able to get a bit closer. At f3.5 it's pretty slow. You're not going to get too much in the way of background blur. As far as price goes, this lens is one of the cheapest you'll find. I've seen them for sale for as little as £10. They really are very, very cheap. All in all, a very nice little lens that you can pick up today for next to nothing. The aperture ring's on the front of the lens here. This one's slightly stiff, needs a little lubrication. There are no click stops on the aperture ring, so it's pretty good for video. The focus ring is behind the aperture ring, and the whole of the front of the lens turns when you turn the focus ring. All in all, a very nice little lens, and for the price you just can't go wrong with one of these. Now here's a lens that's come to me recently as a very kind gift from a workmate. Now I should say that this said workmate was also responsible for very kindly giving me the Onar mirror lens that we looked at in the last episode. So thanks again, Alan, for your very kind gifts, and I think you know that all old camera gear will find a good home on the Xenography channel. So this is the Kiron 28 to 85mm, a useful zoom range. 28 of course is really good for shooting street photography, and 85mm is a moderate zoom. And of course it has all points betwixt and between, so you can use it as a 50mm if you want to. This was one of those lenses that I really wasn't too certain what the result would be. It's an old zoom. Old zooms are known for having compromises. It's not easy to make a zoom lens that does everything well. But as ever, I'm very interested in what old glass can do. Alan was very enthusiastic about this lens, so I was quite enthusiastic to try it out. There seems to be a little bit of separation between two of the elements in this lens, so I wasn't too sure what effect that was going to have on the lens performance. So you can see the separation here. It looks a little bit like oil and water. It has that sort of iridescent kind of look. So it's quite possible that this lens is on borrowed time. One thing's for sure though, it certainly doesn't affect the images now. Having used this lens for a while, I have to say I really like the images it makes. It renders colours in quite a muted sort of way, and I know that's a very popular look with a lot of photographers. It's a pretty sharp lens. Under certain conditions it can produce a little bit of colour fringing, but that's not really a big deal unless you're looking for it. This lens is usefully wide at the wide end, and it makes quite a good street lens. It's not particularly long at the long end, but it's long enough to give you a little bit of extra reach. Like all zooms, it's large and it's heavy. And I must admit those are drawbacks. But as against that, you do get the convenience of not having to change lenses. It's a push-pull zoom, so push forward for the long end, 85mm, and pull backwards for the short end, 28mm. The aperture has clicky stops, so it may not be an ideal video lens. Now, I have to say, at the wide end, there is quite a bit of vignetting on this lens. The corners do get pretty dark. Personally, I don't mind a little bit of that, but if it's not your cup of tea, this lens may not suit. Using the macro feature, you can get down to about 30 centimeters-ish. However, I've had mixed results using that function on this lens, because on some shots the corners are so dark it seems like the image circle just isn't quite covering the sensor. So I think in this case the macro function is probably a mixed blessing. Next up we've got the Olympus Zuiko 135mm f3.5. Now if you've seen any of my other videos, you may know that I'm quite a fan of the Zuiko lenses, and having used this one a fair old bit recently, I am in fact a fan of this one too. It's a lovely lens. It's got plenty of reach, so it's great for nature pictures or street photography if you want to get candid shots. It's fairly slow at f3.5, but the long focal length means that you do get plenty of background blur, and what nice blur that is. Very soft, very creamy, very smooth. Very, very nice indeed. Like all the Zuiko lenses I've tried, this one's great at rendering colour. It's very sharp, and overall it's just generally a lovely little thing. Minimum focus distance is 1.5 meters, which means you can't get particularly close to your subject physically, but because it's a long lens, that doesn't really matter too much. I'm very impressed by this lens. I'm very impressed by the images it makes. They're absolutely lovely. I'm a fan. One of the amazing things about this lens is how short it is. The Jupiter 11 135mm that we looked at last week, which is a rangefinder lens, is about a third longer than this lens. It's just incredible. The Zuiko lenses are known for being small, but this one is really tiny. It's a 135mm. It does flare a bit if you shoot into the light, but it has a built-in hood, so there's no need to carry one with you. It's there on the lens if you need it, which is a really great feature. Apertures have click stops, so perhaps not ideal for video if you want to change your aperture on the fly. All in all though, this is a really, really capable, nice lens. It's beautifully made, it makes beautiful images, and it's really small. This one's definitely a winner for me. Next is another Zuiko lens. This is the 200mm f4. We're now getting into fairly serious zoom territory. This lens has quite a reach. I've really come to like this lens. It renders colours really nicely, it's plenty sharp enough. It's a great lens for candid street photography, it's a great lens for wildlife and nature shots. And should you want to use an Olympus teleconverter, you can double the reach of this lens to 400mm, and you've then got some very serious reach indeed. I've made some very nice images with this lens, and I'm very happy with what it produces. Apertures run from f4 to f32, and the minimum focus distance is not very near at 2.5 meters. However, because it's such a long reach, that doesn't matter terribly much. The one area where this lens doesn't score particularly well is in its physical size. It's a big lens. It's about twice as long as the 135mm, and if you're using it on digital with an adapter, that's going to add another inch or so. So you've then got a very big and heavy lens hanging off the front of your camera. However, it's got all the Olympus Zuiko virtues, nice colour rendition, very sharp, and in a situation where a long lens is needed, this is one of the nicest ones you could use. Now, just like the 135mm lens we looked at earlier, this one has a pull-out lens hood, which is a very handy thing indeed. Like all the Zuiko lenses, this has click stops on the aperture. May not be ideal for video if you want to change aperture on the fly. The focus ring has the usual Olympus diamond pattern rubber finish. I find this very useful because it's very easy to find when you're not looking at it. You can easily find it by feel. And as usual with the Zuiko lens, the focus ring turns very nice and smoothly. No doubt about it, this is a large lens, but if you need a 200mm focal length, this is a really nice one. And finally we have the Leica f2 50mm Summitar. I've been out and about with this lens recently doing some more shots, and I continue to be very impressed both by its quality of manufacture and the images it makes. It's truly a beautiful lens. It's from a time when mechanism and engineering was king. It's from a time not before electronics, but certainly before microelectronics, and definitely before the all-pervasiveness of the computer that we have today. I've found this to be a wonderful lens. It's got a unique look, and it renders colours in a very unique way that I don't think I've ever seen in any other lens. That includes the Zuikos, it includes the Russian lenses, it includes the Helios lenses, Jupiters, Feds, Industars, Nikons, Canons, you name it. No lens that I've yet found produces an image quite like this one, renders colours quite like this one. To me, its images seem unique, and I really don't think I'm overpraising it. Every lens has a signature look. This has a particularly nice one. Now, as we know, these are not particularly cheap lenses, but there again, they're not particularly expensive either. And they're certainly not as expensive as the later Leica lenses, the M-mount lenses. Now, if you want one of these in absolutely top-notch, flawless, as-new condition, of course, those are going to be on the more expensive side. But if you want one with perhaps a few cosmetic faults, but that's mechanically and optically intact, well then you'll find a good one of these starting somewhere around £150 or £200. This lens works really well on digital, and while its minimum focusing distance is only 3 feet, the same as the other 50mm we're looking at here, the Industar 50, its aperture is usefully larger. It's an f2 lens, so it's quite fast. In its day, it was very fast, and it's still pretty quick even now. An f2 is certainly wide enough to give you some very nice, very soft background blur with, I'm pleased to note, a bit of swirl. The aperture ring is just behind the front of the lens here. So minimum aperture is f16 and maximum aperture is f2. And the ring turns very, very nicely and smoothly. It really is beautifully engineered. The focus ring is at the back of the lens here, nearest to the camera body. And there is an infinity lock on this lens, so you push down on this little pin to unlock the lens. And then you can turn the ring either with this tab or with the knurled edge here. I must admit that when you're looking through the viewfinder, I found it rather too easy to grab hold of the aperture ring and turn that rather than turning the focus ring. So I've had to practice and make sure that I hit the focus ring when I need to. A minor difficulty with this lens is that the filter thread is not right at the front of the inside ring where it usually is. It's actually set back a little bit, and I think it needs a special Leica filter. I'm not sure that ordinary ones will fit on there, so it could be tricky to put an ND filter on there, or a coloured filter for black and white photography, or just a UV filter to protect that front element, which in this lens is actually quite delicate. I've had a lot of fun using this lens. It's just such a beautiful lens to use. Every time you turn the dials, you turn the focus ring, you turn the aperture ring, you're reminded of the wonderful quality of workmanship. And certainly on digital, its results are absolutely beautiful. I've not used it on film yet. There will be an upcoming video where I show you some film shots that I plan to do, so stay tuned for that. The bokeh is beautiful on this lens. It has plenty of swirl. It's very, very soft. It's not harsh in any way. It's not unpleasant in any way. It's just lovely. The only minor drawback is the minimum focus distance of 3 feet is not particularly near, and it would be handy if that was shorter. However, it's a rangefinder lens and we mustn't expect more of it than it can do. Full marks to the Leica Summitar f2. So there we are, 5 wonderful lenses, each with its own characteristics, each with its own signature look, each of which can be used today either on film or on digital mirrorless. I've enjoyed using them all. I appreciate each for their unique qualities, and it's been great fun testing them out. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been useful and helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please join me next time for more Zenography. Thanks for watching.